Greetings to all of my erudite friends out there in YouTube. I have a question for you today. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to own 9,000 books on magic? Well, wonder no longer, because today we're interviewing a magician who has a library of over 9,000 books. The magician is Cleveland's own Jim Kleefeld, who invited me to his home and allowed me to interview him and take pictures of his library, so you don't want to miss the advice that he has to offer to other erudite magicians and bibliophiles such as yourself. It's a meaty episode with lots of interesting advice. I put some timestamps down in the description below so that you can jump around to the parts that are interesting to you. I'm excited to share with you his library and his advice, so please help me show some love by clicking that like button for magician Jim Kleefeld. Tell us a little bit about your performance career.
I got a magic trick when I was in Cub Scouts, and it fooled my mother, and I've never stopped. I've just loved doing magic ever since I was literally 7 or 8 years old, and I've done it almost every year. When I got to high school, I went in the high school talent show as a magic act. Didn't win, but I did magic in high school. As soon as I got done with college, I started marketing myself as a performer, and I did stand-up shows, mostly for children and family audiences. I became a kid show magician. I love children. I was a teacher. I taught kindergarten. 5-year-old kids are just blessings. They're just the best. And I loved doing shows for children. They're laughing, they're smiling, they're surprised, and everything's a wonder. That was a real hook for me. It was like, just keep doing this magic. This magic stuff is great. I started putting together shows for libraries with a little bit about books and reading. I did that in 1971. So this is literally my 50-year anniversary of doing magic shows for libraries full-time. Over the years, I started writing articles to magazines. I got a few columns in Laugh Makers and MUM and Apocalypse, and had some stuff published. I just continued to enjoy magic and buying the books and reading them. Branched out from kid show stuff to other things. So I learned close-up and card magic and sleight of hand and rope tricks and all of that from the books I read. When I'd been doing magic shows for kids for about 35 years or so, I decided to branch out and do magic shows for adults. I opted into mentalism for those, so I put together shows that were mostly mentalism shows and just for adults. Most of those had wrapped around a theme of some kind, like the Salem witch trials or the Titanic or Sherlock Holmes, or I have a show about the Civil War, and they involve magic in the mentalism site.
How many books do you have here in your library?
About 9,000 books are in my database. I might have missed a few along the way, but that also includes individual volumes in series. For example, I have 60-some Blackstone the Magician comic books that are counted individually and things like that. About 9,000. I started a long time ago building a FileMaker database with the books in it, and I just put stuff that I would think would be convenient for me. Author, title, illustrator, publisher, date, cost, number of pages, some of those things. It's not real elaborate, but it's enough to give me a real clear idea of what the book is, who made it, when.
Or what you paid for it.
Or what I paid for it.
That's interesting too.
Yeah. A while back I added current cost, because sometimes you see a book go on an auction list or an eBay or something that's you bought for $35 and it's sold for $160.
Do you sell books ever?
I have sold books. I have run out of room on the shelves. I'm not going to build another edition on the house, so they have to fit in the library. If I get another book, I have to take one off. I have sold some books that I thought I probably wouldn't use. They weren't really in my bailiwick. I know the viewers are probably going to flinch at this, but I've sold quite a few card books because there's just simply so much card magic out there. Yep. A lot of it just duplicates itself, and I know some people that can make their entire career off of one Jennings book, and they don't need anything else. I read all of Harry Lorraine's books, and I thought I'm probably not going to go back and use that material, so things like that I kind of sold off.
How did you get started collecting books? So you have 9,000, something like that doesn't happen by accident.
Not really. I think there is a kind of a collector mentality in some people. I tend not to throw things out once I have it. I worked really hard to get where I was at and to be able to afford things which I couldn't when I was real young, when I was, little. So when I did get something I paid for, my, thought was to just hang on to this. And I've always been a bibliophile. I've just always loved reading, even when I was a little kid. So most of the time I've kept books of various sorts. And that was true when I started buying magic books. I think the first set I bought, the first serious books I bought in magic were Rice's. I got that whole 3-volume set of Rice's Encyclopedia of Silk Magic, because that would be enough for the rest of my career.
Right.
If you read the Rice's, that everything is in there. There's illusions, there's parlor magic, there's close-up, there's stuff with silks that you could actually do the same thing with rope instead of silks. There's productions and vanishes and sleight of hand, and I thought, this is all I'll ever need. I have the encyclopedia of anything you would ever want to do with magic, with silks. But there's so much material in that, I just couldn't ever see parting with those.
Sure.
And then a little while later, I bought Tarbell. There's another one, same thing. There's, you can pick up any volume of Tarbell today and find something you never saw before and something you can use.
That's fascinating to me, too, that you keep the cost. I'm sure there'd be a lot of really interesting data about the price of books over the years.
Yeah.
What have you seen in terms of the trends for that?
It's really hard to predict. You can probably go buy the Rice's books today for the same price I paid for them. It depends a little bit on what's desirable at the time. Right now, Magic's sort of taken a swing towards really close-up and sleight of hand, cardistry, a lot of card stuff. So parlor magic shows with silk productions out of a squared circle are out of vogue. So any books that have that kind of material in them are, down in price. And some of the stuff that's going up is actually more recent. I just saw Bannon's Mr. Fantasy, I think, go for $125.
The hardbound?
The hardbound. I think I paid $30 for it, maybe.
What's the most you've ever spent on a book, if you don't mind my asking?
No, that's pretty easy. $950. When I was 25-ish or so, I think, The Magic of Robert Harbin came out. It cost $75, brand new. It was just appalling to me that I just couldn't imagine back then. Well, that was a long time ago. I couldn't imagine any book being worth $75. I really wanted that book. It had the zigzag plans in it, and topsy-turvy, and the Harbin case, and all kinds of stuff, and I really wanted that book. I wasn't able to pay $75 for that book. And about 6 or 8 years later, I saw one used on an auction go for $245. And I thought I should get that. It's going up in value. But I couldn't see paying $245 for a used book. And about 10 years later, I saw one go at an auction for $450. And I thought I should get that, but I couldn't see paying $450 for a book. And 10 years later, the next time I saw one, it was $950. And I said, by gosh, I'm just going to bite the bullet and buy that book.
What a great story.
Sure wish I would have forked over the $75. Although at the time, I don't think I had the $75 when it did come out.
Right. If you want to avoid missing out on a book and having to spend $950 to acquire it later, then shop with our sponsor this week at Don's Magic and Books. Don's offering you, my Erudite viewers, 10% off this week with code Kleefeld at checkout. I will put a description down below to Don's website, and please use that code Kleefeld to save 10% off Jim's books, the Book Test Book and Locked, which are some tremendous mentalism volumes. Do you have a favorite book in your collection?
Wow, that's a tough one. A favorite book. Usually my favorite book is the one I just got and just started reading. I guess there's a couple right up there at the top. Kaufman's big 2-volume set on Tenyoism. That's probably one of my favorite books in the way it's set up and laid out and designed, and the material and the information in it. You can't do any tricks out of that book. It's a description of the toys they made, the props they built. But it's just fascinating material. There's so much in there that's clever and original and inventive. So I really enjoy it. I'll pick that up and flip through Tenuism every once in a while.
And how would you say that your library has helped your development as a magician, or in what way is your library important to you?
I've always thought you should be knowledgeable performer. I think anybody who does magic and does tricks and does shows should know more than just the tricks they're doing. You have to know the derivation and the background behind a lot of material in order to make it your own and in order to make it good. I enjoy reading about similar tricks, background tricks, information about people that made tricks and invented tricks in order to enhance my own study, my own knowledge of those things I perform. If I go out and do the floating block on the cord trick, I like knowing where that came from and how many versions there were, and why that's important. Sometimes it helps you make a much better presentation, because if you know 3 different versions of how something works, you can build pattern that helps negate people's thought processes. You can explain what's not happening.
When you do research, what's your process? With 9,000 books, I think I could get lost for about 6 weeks, in one project. So what's your process when you go to research something and to perform it?
I think the first step is a mental process of understanding that it will be long and slow. You have to say to yourself, I can't just run out there and pick up a book and do the research. You have to know it's going to take you a while to get through things. Since I bought all of these books myself, I paid for them, I put them in the database, I put them on the shelf in alphabetical order. I know other things that the author does. I have a pretty good idea of what's on the shelf and what material is in there. So if I'm doing some research, I know where to look. I know there's a handful of books to look at. I can pull those books out to look for a specific thing. Some projects are just bigger than that. When I wrote the book test book, I just literally sat in this library and thumbed through almost every book I thought might have a book test in it. And I started at the first shelf in the first corner, and I went down reading the spines, and I guess 8, 10, 12 books, and I'm like, aha, this one might have a book test in it. Take it off the shelf, sit down, flip through, read through the whole book. Nope, no book test in there. Put it back on the shelf. I did that with most of the library. I didn't open every book, but I looked at the spine of almost every book and said to myself, would that have a book test in it? If so, I could sit down and find it.
Sounds excruciating and exhilarating at the same time. It sounds like a really fun way to spend some time to look through the books and get to know them. What's your advice to people who are more or less just starting out selecting material or selecting books, I should say, to purchase?
I think you need to consider what subjects you want first and look for books in those subjects. Are you really into mentalism? Are you just into card tricks? Are you into self-working card tricks? What kinds of things are you interested in first? Then I think you should look for older books that the pros consider classics. If you're young and starting out, go talk to somebody that's got more books than you do and ask their advice. Some of the best material out there is in the older books. A lot of people get caught up in the latest fad, the hottest thing, the newest stuff, and then they'll get a book and they'll read it and they'll just be startled at how clever and original and inventive this guy is and what a great trick he came up with. And then you only know one thing that one guy did, and it might not even be his trick. It might be
right.
His version of somebody else's trick. I literally had a guy tell me that he invented a trick that Bev Bergeron used to do. If Bev Bergeron used to do that trick,
right.
How do you think you invented it? And his point was, well, when he did his, he had a picture that was black and white, but I used color. I'm like, yeah, I don't think you really invented that.
Are there favorite publishers that you have? styles of books?
Stephen Minch's Hermetic Press, I don't think has ever put out a bad product.
No.
Everything I've gotten from them has been very, very nicely put together in terms of both the material and the look and feel of the book itself. Kaufman, of course, has done a marvelous job over the years. He's slowed down in publishing as less people buy books, and he's taken on bigger challenges, writing the Tenuism and the Jennings book. I mean, these aren't little pamphlets, and they're not quick and easy to put out, so I think we can forgive him for running
sure.
a monthly magazine and writing a 600-page book at the same time. And Todd Carr's Miracle Factory has just done some marvelous, marvelous pieces. Todd puts a lot of time and effort into the research. Even when he's not writing the book himself, there's some of those things that he's put together, just marvels of publishing, both the ideas and the look and that.
Are there other interesting stories about the way in which you've obtained books?
I guess the most interesting story related to any of that is the fact that my wife lets me.
Right.
And that goes way back. I remember when I was a teacher earning not very much money, low teacher salary. She was working part-time. We had 2 boys we were raising. We were eating macaroni and cheese because we didn't have tons of money. And I bought a book I still have, one of the few books I have that's not a book. I was getting a magazine called Invocation, and in there was an ad for a scroll, a legendary scroll of masculine image. And that scroll unrolled on 2 dowels to show you bizarre magic tricks, explain the routines and the effects and how they work. And I think it was outrageous at the time. I think it was $50, and that was back in 1971 or something. She and I discussed that, and she said, go ahead, you want it, you should get it. Bless her, I love her for that. She's kind of always carried through with that. That scroll I still have today, and it's highly sought after. I saw one go on an auction for $1,200. I paid the original full price for it when it was new, and that was expensive, but it was more like $50, not $1,200
right.
at the time.
I know you've published several books and other things, so maybe put in a little plug for that.
When I was researching stuff to do mental magic for my adult shows, I came across a few tricks with locks, and I thought it would be interesting to research the use of locks as a magic trick. So I ended up finding enough research to write a whole book, 320-page book called Locked, which is all about 7 keys to Baldpates and gimmick locks and padlocks and how locks work and how regular locks work and how tricks and routines with keys and padlocks and combination locks all work. That caught on, became a very big seller. I still sell those to this day. Locked has been reviewed very graciously and nicely by quite a few people, and I'm very proud of that. After that, I used what I knew in mentalism to buy, find, and get book tests about book tests. I bought a lot of commercial book tests. I bought books that mentalists wrote that had book tests in them, and I ended up sort of categorizing and detailing those, and ended up writing the book test book. It's 350 pages of book tests. There are 1,200 book tests described in it. About 500 of those are commercial book tests with photographs of the book. There's 1,200 photos in there.
It's an amazing book. I've reviewed it.
The book test book likewise has been very popular, very well received. When I got all the way done with the whole thing, I was about to send it off to a publisher, and it occurred to me that book ought to be a book test. So I went back and spent literally another month changing words and altering sentence structure to turn that book into a book test.
Any final words of wisdom or advice just generally you want to give to our erudite magicians watching?
Yes, buy books. Read them.
Well said.
Keep up with them. There's always something new coming out. Some of them aren't going to be any good, and I've had books that I didn't even finish because I thought it wasn't very well written or didn't have very good ideas, but at least you know. Now you have negative information, Maybe I'm not going to buy this guy's next book because I didn't like what he wrote the first time, and you know what not to try. I've read stuff in a book where I thought, holy cow, I never would have done that, and it occurs to me, maybe I need to rethink not just what I'm doing, but what I'm not doing. There's an awful lot of stuff in the books, and the only way you can get that information is to have a lot of them. I read all the time.
That's what I have for you this week. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Again, please give some love to Jim by clicking that like button and commenting down below with any other questions that you may have. Jim does interact here in the comments, so please let him know how much you enjoyed his library and the interview with him. Don't forget to check out Don's Magic and Books this week and use Kleefeld at checkout to save 10% on all of your books, pamphlets, DVDs, and tricks. Enjoy, have a great week, and until next time, keep reading.